Okay, perfect. Okay, good afternoon, Mr. Singhal. My name is Sam Lee, and today I'll be interviewing you on behalf of Ha. To start with, do you mind telling me a little bit more about your early life? Where and when were you born?
So I was born in India in a small town called Morar, which is in Gwalior, major city, and a state of MP, which is the central state in India. I was born in 67. And is that all you needed?
That's pretty good. Yeah, you can feel free to like elaborate and talk about whatever
Sure.
else you want. There's
Okay.
it's an open-ended interview, so
Okay.
yeah. Yeah, so if you want to elaborate a little bit more on your childhood and like maybe more of the household you grew in. I know you have a
Sure.
few siblings, correct?
Yes.
Hmm.
So I'm the oldest of four kids in my family, and this was the first time that in my family we had more than one son in three generation. So three brothers and a sister, and my family was financially they were well off to Indian standards, but from the perspective of sophistication, they were not. They were basically we were grain dealers and made oil and dealt with rice and lentils and that sort of thing. So I had the unique background where my family was financially fine, but we were sort of living very simple lives. So if you came to my home, you would not feel that I was well off. In fact, I was ashamed for most of my life to have friends come over to my home because I was sent to a all boys boarding school when I was 9 years old. And this school obviously had kids from all over the country and even from Indian diaspora from abroad. And so I was almost like a Tarzan, coming from some jungle to this civilized school, elitist school, and I never wanted them to come to my home. So that's the kind of the double. But I had my grandfather was very well respected in his community. He employed 100 people at that time, and he was well regarded. He was considered like a leader of his community. But the lifestyle was very uncouth, very sort of. We didn't even have proper furniture at home. We just things like that. So that was my unique background. I had both sides of. I lived like a poor person, but I wasn't poor. Let's put it this way.
Uh-huh.
And
Okay, that's very interesting. I think you touched on like what your parents did, but would you feel comfortable elaborating a bit more on what kind of occupations they had?
yes, so my mother was a house mother.
Mhm.
She worked at home, and I think she worked harder than anybody else. She washed clothes, she did cleaning at the house, even though we had people and helping us at home. But she did cooking. She did, and we lived in a joint family, so my grandparents were with us, and my grandmother and mother would always work in the kitchen and the house. And my father joined his father's business because he went to the same boarding school, but he left after his ninth or 10th grade and got married when he was 17 years old. My mother had me when she was 17. So they joined the family with business. Nobody before me had a high school education. So my father joined his father's business and he started a small factory where they were manufacturing lentils, basically, and they did mustard oil. They basically processed mustard oil and things like that. These are very small operations, but they did that in that city.
I see. That's very cool, actually. I think you were talking a little bit about like your boarding school. Is this something that you went from like middle school, high school? Was it kind of combined?
So I was 9 years old. So I
Mhm.
started in fourth grade.
Mhm.
And before that, I was in a convent school in my hometown. And this boarding school, I started at age 9. And uh, as I was saying, that it was a shock for me because I was not used to an organized life or a clean that sort of people spoke English there, and I was suddenly was always on the blacklist that I couldn't speak English. And at that time in India, English was a big deal. That if you didn't speak, it was almost like a backward caste you were from, class. And so I struggled with that in the beginning. I couldn't speak a sentence. I couldn't say, in fact, I didn't understand a sentence. And this boarding school experience is what I am today. I did not become bitter, despite a lot of struggles and a lot of stress that I had to go through. There were ragging and hazing by seniors. The teachers were not friendly most of the time, at least, and from my perspective. But I wasn't bitter. I fought through it. And by the time I came to 12th grade, I was a prefect, house prefect. I was good in sports. I was not good in studies. I actually flunked my 12th grade. That's another story. But I fought through. And to describe my boarding school experience is like, have you seen the movie Shawshank Redemption?
No, I have not.
Okay, so this is a movie in a prison setting. So I like to call my school as like Shawshank Redemption Light, where nobody was killing anybody, but pretty much everything else was happening.
Yeah, that definitely sounds like a tough learning curve.
Yeah. And nobody expected me to do anything with my life at that stage. They all thought I was some loser who's gonna join his dad's business. In fact, somebody predicted that I would join my dad's business and destroy it.
Oh man.
So here I am, talking to you, being interviewed for, at least being an Asian American who's done okay, right?
You've done amazing.
Yeah.
Was this like boarding school kind of like a private school that like
Yes.
you paid tuition for? I'm assuming if it was, there was like, I think you touched on, but like there's like some class disparity, obviously. And you were from a rural area, you mentioned, sort of more like remote compared to like an urban setting.
Well, the city had almost 1 million people in it. But from Indian standards, it was still a very small town. And I won't call it a rural area, but the lifestyle was rural. Let's put it this way. It had that backward city mentality. And the royal family from that city, still had a lot of control. So there's a lot of feudal elements to it in terms of politics in that city, even as of today. In fact, after I'm talking about 50 years later, they still have that same mentality. So it's not rural as such, but my grandfather, because he dealt with a lot of rural people, like villagers who came to sell their grains to him and talk to him. So I was surrounded by those kind of people. I saw, in fact, there were almost every day, there were 20, 30 bullock carts in front of my grandfather's office shop. And I remember they used to spend nights there because they didn't have a place to stay. And in winters, they'll have a little bonfire. And I remember spending times with them. And they used to give me a lot of attention because I was the kid from this family. So that way I had the experience of the rural side. And school, certainly, the thing with the school was that you had kids from film stars kids, you had kids from wealthy families all over India. And so the class difference was, for me, was that I was very uncouth in terms of my polish at that time. And because of the language, suddenly I was even worse because I couldn't even, and they looked down at me. Most of the time they looked down at me thinking, there was a term used, low keel, which meant that somebody who's from local sort of rural area, kind of backward area. So they'll call me low keel, and I was not the only one. There were other kids from my kind of backgrounds, and they were in the similar situation. So for me to be sort of polished now, talking with more sophistication, that's a 360-degree change. I mean, I have come a full cycle. I couldn't talk like that. And they, people from that time, they still can't believe it that I talk like this now. So,
No, that's crazy. Um, oh, just curious, can I get the name of the boarding school? Just for,
yes, yes, it was Scindia
mhm,
School. So it's like India, and if you add SC before
mhm.
India.
India
So
school.
this was the name of the royal family from that town. And they
Oh,
had the school in their name.
mhm.
It's almost 130 years old. And the first principal was the British principal. So they had, I like to joke, they took all the bad British habits and they combined it with all the bad Indian habits. So,
All right. Um, I know your parents, they decided, I know your father went to the boarding school, so he kind of decided you should go there as well. Could you maybe talk about your parents' hopes and expectations for you at that point and maybe touch on a couple of values they might have instilled upon you?
yeah,
Oh, hold, sorry, I'm so sorry. Can you,
that's fine.
I'm doing, sorry, like I said, it's a public study room, but I'm so sorry. Do you want me to repeat the question?
No. I got the question. That's a great question, by the
Mhm.
way, Sam. Uh, So, the I'm talking about 60s and 70s, the India of that time, we were just coming out of, British rule, right? We had become independent in 47. Still, India of that time was like two cars, two bars of soap, brands of soap, and one TV in Delhi station, nothing in my town, uh, and load of population, people struggling to even make a living. But one thing that generation of my parents had, and I'm sure you can relate to this, is they were obsessed with education. They thought the only way to get out of the middle class rut was through education. And my father always discouraged me to go to his business because it was not as sophisticated. They were making good money. They were not poor, but he never encouraged me to go there. And I never liked it the way they ran it. There was no place to sit. Everything was everywhere. It was like dust everywhere, muddy. So my father actually wanted me to be an engineer. And science was the big deal with our parents. And even now, I think it's still there with Asian families, the medicine and engineering. So my dad used to take me to the market, which was far from our home, and he'll take me from a longer way where the engineering college was. And I remember he'll always show it to me, that's your future. That's your future. And I was terrible in math and physics and sciences. And the other reason I was terrible in it was that the language, the English has been my struggle. And now I'm a lawyer. The tool of my profession is the language. But this language has been a very difficult subject for me throughout because I struggled with it and the teachers struggled with it. When they taught you math in English medium, they didn't know how to express themselves. I never even learned the basic concepts. And maybe I was not for it. But I remember like a year ago, my 13-year-old son at that time showed me that priority method, how you solve an equation. I did not even know that first you deal with multiplication and division, then you go with pluses and minuses.
Yeah.
You know, so the value they gave me was that I had to be a professional because
Mhm.
we came from a business family. And my father always said, I want you to be an engineer. You work for somebody for a few years, then we do some big business, sophisticated business. That was his idea. And in Indian law school system, you elect your choice of career after 10th grade. So he basically realized he forced me to elect engineering drawing and math and chemistry. And I had barely passed these things until 10th grade. I was barely passing or not even passing. Sometimes the teachers were just letting me go. Uh, you know, so 11th I struggled. 12 is a board exam. It finally hit me where I couldn't deal with it, and I failed. I flunked, and so that was the worst thing that could happen to you after a boarding school 12th grade, because the school doesn't take you back anymore. So now you have to just take the exam through the board, the board itself, and you go sit somewhere. So I chose that school to go back to just take the exam, but I had to study on my own after flunking. And the blessing was that it felt like I lost ground under feet, but the blessing was that I started thinking for myself. That's the first time I started making decisions for myself, because I didn't find a friend. The relatives were kind of making fun of me. There was all kind of sarcasm going around among friends and family. And I decided that I need to make my own decision. And I basically respectfully said to my dad that I'm going to give up this and I'm going to go into economics and accounting. He wasn't pleased, but that's the best decision, the first ever major decision I made for my life. And that's why I'm sitting here in front of you. Because next year, when I took that exam, and I took a tutor who basically taught me those courses in less than 8 months for 2 years worth of courses. And I came first in that class that year among the kids who took those courses. So I wasn't stupid, but I just wasn't meant for math, physics, and science. So the values, I failed him in some ways, but now if you ask him, he's happy that I made that decision. So,
Yeah, that's amazing. Um, I know like you said you finished like 12th grade there and took like I guess it's like a gap year, but did you do university over in India or did you
yes. So, and then remember you talked about my town. So the one thing I got from my school was that I had my best friend who was from Delhi, and his father was a lawyer, one of the really well-known lawyers in India. He actually represented Indira Gandhi, who used to be the Prime Minister of India, and he used to show me his articles and some magazines. So I remember my first feeling was that I need to, and he took me one time, I visited him in Delhi, and I went to his home. From now, I go to his home, it's the same home. He's no more, but his parents, his mother is still connected to me. So his home was what we are used to homes here. There was a clean home, it was well organized, everything was in place. And I felt like, my God, this is the life I want for myself. And so I wanted to get out of my home city. And when I flunked, I took the exam. My scores were good, but they were still not good enough to get into a good Delhi college, the one that I wanted to be in. I couldn't. So there was Delhi University had a program where you could take it by correspondence. It's like not online, but correspondence, that they let you take the exam under their umbrella and they give you the books and you prepare for yourself. So I chose that option and took the first year college through correspondence. And I did well after that first year. And then I went to the college where I wanted to be in, that particular college, and asked them if they'll accept me as a transfer student. And they did. So,
sorry to interrupt. Do you mind sharing the name of the college?
yes, the name of the college was Ramjas, Ramjas. And so finally I got my feet there. But the problem in Delhi was that I didn't have a place to stay, and it's very expensive. So by this time, my father's business had gone down significantly. My grandfather was no more. So it was difficult. So I was basically piling on different places, taking a small room on a third floor of somebody's home with no bathroom, no windows, that sort of thing. It's like a closet that we have in our rooms here. Uh, and so I did my undergrad in commerce, which is business undergraduation, from Delhi University at Ramjas College. And then I did law from Delhi as well. So I did well after commerce undergrad, which was enough for me to get into law school in Delhi University. So I did law as well from Delhi, which is a LLB. Uh, so
I see. Was there a reason you kind of switched from like your economics to like law?
Well, the economics and accounting was for the business background. I didn't know
Mhm.
what else to take otherwise,
Yeah.
because I didn't want it history or arts for sure. So the business side, and I'm glad that I took, because as a business litigator, those accounting principles really help me when I look at the books, when I look at the finances. The understanding of those concepts is really helpful. So that's the reason. And law was always on my mind. I just didn't know what to do in undergrad. So,
Mm,
so
I
that was the
see.
best option.
Um, if you don't mind, maybe we can switch from like maybe talking about your background more to like immigration.
Yeah.
I know you immigrated here from your form, like when you're after, I think in your 30s, I believe.
No, 20, I was 25.
25, sorry. Uh,
Hmm?
can you talk more about your immigration experience?
Yeah. So before that, uh, when I did law, I started working, even throughout law school, I was working for a lawyer there. And my other goal was politics. I actually really, at some point of time, I started thinking about Indian politics. I really wanted to be an Indian politician. I had the zeal of changing India's whatever, make India. And I had this goal that I'll be 100% made in India. I did not want it to go anywhere. US was not an option for me. I never even considered that. But what happened when I was in third year law school, I met some professors from Franklin Pierce Law Center in New Hampshire who were visiting, and they had a summer program that they were selling. And I met one of the, met them, and they gave me literature. So I just happened to just send it, apply it, just fill out that form and send it. And in 93, I got a letter from them saying I have been accepted. But the tuition was about $6,000. And then plus I had about maybe like $1,500 that my dad had given me to start a career in Delhi. And so I wrote to them saying, I can't afford it. So Professor Hennessy, who used to be that professor, I actually just met him a year ago when I was visiting East Coast. They called me and they said, you know what, they'll waive the tuition as long as if I can afford to come, just to, with my ticket and take care of my living expenses, and I could work at the library, make some money there, they'll waive my tuition. So I took that chance. I was coming only for summer, only for a 6-week course. Nobody from my family ever came to drop me at the airport from Delhi. I had never taken a flight before that. I had never seen a plane before that. So I thought I was going for summer. And I was scared because, the $1,500 that I had was about to finish. But I met a lawyer who was very successful in Delhi, I was considering working with. And I asked him, he was really well respected in his 70s. And I said to him, sir, what do you think? I had this admission, but if I go and I come back, I don't know how this is going to help me. And I'm going to lose all my savings. And he says to me that, obviously it's your decision, Dinesh, but let me tell you something. And, foreign travel is not as much a big deal anymore for anybody, even in India. But at that time, it was a big deal. So he says to me that all I can tell you is that a foreign trip like this can change your life. And he didn't elaborate or anything. And I said to him, would I have a job when I come back? He says, we'll talk. We're working on it. That's what he said. I took this leap of faith and I applied for visa. And the visa officer at US consulate asked me, because at my age, 24 at that time or 25, students didn't get visas. So he asked me, why do you want to go for summer this school? And I said to him that, I'm going for this IP course. And the reason was that at that time, US always used to put India in a particular category under some trade section where they said India was not opening its markets. So it was always being punished for that. And I said, look, I want to understand this aspect of it. What is your problem with this? So we can deal with it. And I thought he'll get upset at me for being so frank, saying that you guys put us in this penalizing situation. We don't like it, so we want to deal with you. We want to learn your system and then fight with you about that. And he gives me the visa. So here I am for summer school for a month and a half, and with plans to go back. And that was another reason that I normally don't share, but I had met somebody who had just graduated from Harvard, a Indian origin girl. She was from Harvard, and she had taken a year off teaching in India in a boarding school, some boarding school. So I met her by chance, and we fell in love. And she was gonna come back, and we were gonna get married. She was gonna come back, and she lived in Cambridge. So when she found out about my admission, she said, hey, you should come and see where I'm from, and then we come back in November and get married. We had a date set. And so it was an added incentive for me to come. And so I came. And after summer school, our relationship went down. The parents didn't like me or whatever. And, I was basically, they didn't think I was gonna be anybody. So that relationship fell apart. But the other thing that happened was that I met my cousin was getting married, and his wife's brother had a joint venture firm in Cambridge, Boston. And when I met him at the wedding, he said, hey, we're doing some joint venture work in Russia and potentially in India. And I like some law clerk, kind of a guy who can look at our legal documents. So before we give it to the law firms. So would you work for me? I said, I'd love to, because I wanted my $1,500 back till November. And so he offered me a job right after I was coming out of summer school, out of nowhere. And my only feeling was that maybe I'll save this relationship, and also maybe I'll have some more money. So he offered me $8 an hour, right? And I was excited. $8 an hour was a big deal at that time. This is 93. And so I started working for him, and I was struggling because suddenly my English, the Indian education is not the same. I can't write the way these guys write here. I couldn't type at that time. So I'm struggling. So 6 months later, he pretty much tells me that he doesn't think he can sustain me, but he had done my H1. So remember, I came as a student, but before I could work for him, he did my H1 for 2 years. But in 6 months, he tells me that he can't sustain this. And I don't blame him, because I was struggling. I wasn't even earning $8 an hour. And then I was stressed out about this relationship that was going downhill. So I lose my job. And then she, basically breaks up with me, which, so this is the second, this thing. And I was almost about to take a flight back home. And I didn't plan, but this is the first time I felt that now maybe I need to prove myself. But I didn't have a place to stay. I didn't have any money. So my ticket that was for about 8 months, open-ended ticket, was about to expire. So I had to go back. But then I have an uncle, my mother's uncle lives in New York. So when I left the job, I went and stayed with them for a few days. And I had a flight to catch from New York. And so he says to me, why don't you take New York bar exam, Dinesh? And I said, well, one, I can't take the New York bar exam because it needs 1 year of education here. And second, I don't have money. But California allows me to take the bar exam. California was the only state that allowed a foreign lawyer to take a bar exam without having gone to school here, because my summer credits were only 4 or 5 credits. Remember that?
Yeah.
And that was not enough. So he says, well, I can't give you money, but you can stay here and prepare for California bar exam. And if you want to consider more education, then, stay, I'll feed you, but I won't give you money. And then he had a medicine manufacturing pharmaceutical company in New Jersey. And he said to me, if you want, I can talk to my manager there. You can work there. And all they need is a supervision of the technicians who are working on the capsule machine. So somebody has to sit there to watch them. And so you can study and make $8 an hour. So I took that offer. And so I was studying for two things. One, I was studying for LSAT because I decided, I met Dean Alderman from U of H at a law school forum in New York. And I was inquiring about LLM, and he says, why do you want to go do LLM, Dinesh? It's worthless. If you want to be a litigator or mainstream attorney, then you should do JD. I said, why would I go 3 years? JD, I already have a law degree from Delhi. He says, because, your law degree is not, makes you prepared for practicing here. It's not like medicine. You don't have jury system in India. Here we have juries, which is totally different. But if you do well after the first year, I'll treat your Indian credits as 1 year worth of transfer credits. So he's just talking with me. He's a funny guy talking with me, nothing in writing. So that thing stayed in my head. And I applied to a lot of law schools, including University of Houston. I had never heard of Houston before. I had never been to Houston before. But I met this funny guy who said, if you came to University of Houston, he may consider giving me 1 year off. And the tuition was low at that time for foreign students at University of Houston. So I applied. And at the same time, I took the LSAT while working from New York. And I applied to California bar exam. So think about it. I'm applying to go to first year of law school, but at the same time, I'm applying to take the California bar exam. So on Christmas Day in '94, I go to California. I remember that flight very well. Mm-hmm. And there was a guy who worked with his cousin's firm. He was a Pakistani guy, and he became friends with me. So I was talking with him that I have to be in California and I don't have a place to stay. So he says that he knows a few of his friends who are students at Cal State Fullerton School, and they have an apartment. Maybe he can talk, they'll let me stay with them. So I said, yeah, that'll be great. Now, remember, India and Pakistan here working, the dynamic, right? So he calls them and they say, sure. So one of them showed up and picked me up at the airport. Very nice of him. They were students. There were 4 of them living in a 2-bedroom apartment, paying about $1,100 among 4 of them. So they were happy to have me because now I split that $1,100 with them, right? Into 5. So we 5 of us in 2-bedroom apartment. And he got me a job with an Indian guy who had a Days Inn hotel in front of Disneyland. There was a Days Inn right in front of Disneyland. So every evening from 5 p.m. to 5 a.m., I would work as a night clerk, checking in, checking out. And after about midnight, it was not as busy, so I could study a few hours. And then in the morning, I'll come home and just sleep on the couch and then go back. So I worked 5 days a week at that Days Inn, making $5.25. He used to give me that money in cash. So about 60 some bucks a day, right? For 12 hours of work. Then I took a bus back and forth. That was about 45 minutes each. So 14 hours were going for that 65 bucks a day.
Yeah.
When you look back at these things, it's amazing. But I needed that. And I also, then I took a course to prepare for California bar exam. Mm-hmm. So I had to leave that job for 3 months when I took that course. And what I did, I found a law school in Fullerton called Western State Law School. It was not ABA approved, but the best thing they had was that they had a library that they allowed me to sit in, and it opened from 7 a.m. till midnight. And there was a Taco Bell and Del Taco in front of them. Uh-huh. And I basically ate bean burrito every day, twice a day for like 79 cents each, and worked from that library and prepared and took classes which were happening close by.
Mhm.
And and so when I took the bar exam in May of that 95, about the same time I heard, in August, I heard from University of Houston saying that they have a spot for me. I was on wait list until that time. And they said they have a spot for me. This is August 11th or 12th. They said school starts on 16th or 17th. Can you be here? I said, yes. So I went to New York, picked up my stuff from my uncle's place, and then took a flight to Houston and lived in a dorm here for a little bit. And there we are. Now, the you would wonder how would I pay for my tuition, right? I didn't have money. So when I came here, I told them I'll apply for loans. And so I applied for student loans. Obviously, I don't qualify as a foreign student. So there were some private loans that I could apply through Sallie Mae. And the interest rate was high, but they would not let me apply on my own because I didn't have a credit history in this country at that time. So I called my uncle, my mother's uncle, and I was nervous because, I wasn't sure how he'll react. But he said, yes, he'll consider being a guarantor on my application. Now you're talking about somebody taking a chance that if you don't pay your loans, then he'll be on hook to pay those loans.
Yeah,
And so that's how my application got approved, and I was able to attend school here.
I see. And that was for your 3-year law degree, correct?
2 years. So
Oh
remember,
yeah, you did it
so
into.
after the first year,
Mhm.
so I didn't have anything in writing. They didn't know about it. And after the first year, I went to Dean Alderman and I said, sir, I'm not sure if you remember me, but I had met you 2 years ago. You had said this. So he says, yes, I remember our conversation. What's your grade like? I said, I'm 3.16 or something like that after first year. Is that good enough? He
Uh-huh.
says, yeah, that's good enough. I'll
Uh-huh.
honor it.
Yeah.
So I was able to complete my JD in 2 years.
Wow.
And then first year law school, when I was sitting by Thanksgiving time,
Uh-huh.
I found out that I passed the California bar exam.
Oh wow. Okay.
So I'm sitting in first year law school class,
Uh-huh.
and I just heard that I passed my California bar exam, which is the hardest bar exam.
Uh-huh. That's
So
crazy.
that's my checkered history right there.
Uh-huh. I know you just kind of told like all your immigration history, but just to like kind of take a step back, from any time throughout your experience in America, did you face any like challenges? I know it's very hard for like an Asian American to just leave everything behind and come here alone in your case, and
Mhm.
just I know you hop from here to there just to barely hang on and survive. But like, what are some challenges? Like, did you face any adversity from other people, and so
So,
on?
so the main adversity was mainly my status, right?
Yeah.
So I came as a student. The first H1 was easy because this cousin's brother was able to do that for me, right?
Mhm.
But after that, I went back to law school, so I had to reapply for a student status. And then when I was on a student, so now this time it's been 3 years, I've not been back home. My mother is going crazy there, thinking that I'm dying or something.
Yeah.
And so we did. There's something in immigration law that allowed people in my situation to go to Mexico or to go to Canada and apply for a new visa on your passport so you can travel.
Mm.
So I decided that, just in my stupid thinking, I thought, the brown folks in Mexico may be more, uh,
Uh-huh.
more considerate of my situation. I'm not sure about Canadians, so I go to Mexico. This a law school buddy of mine, Brian Bacchus, and I drove to El Paso to go to American consulate in Mexico and in Huada. And so we go there in the morning, and they denied me.
Ah.
So the Mexican lady who interviewed me said, you need to go back to India to apply for your visa. So now I'm stuck. She denied me. The good thing about the law was that if you go to Mexico, the reason I chose that is even if you're denied, you can come back one time based on your student status.
Mhm.
But if you go out of Mexico and Canada, you cannot come back if they deny you visa. So I cannot afford to go back to India because now I got denied one time. If I go back, it's almost certain they're going to deny me again and I cannot come back. So now for first 6-7 years, I couldn't go.
Mhm.
So after law school, I got 2-3 job offers, one from LexisNexis, one from another firm. And with LexisNexis, they had an offer letter for me. They interviewed me 2-3 times. They were going to send me to Cleveland, Ohio to work as a staff attorney. And the salary was discussed. And from day one, I told them about my status. I said, look, you will have to do my H1.
Mhm.
And they said, yeah, that's fine. But the moment we were about to sign this agreement, and I heard that the HR said they cannot do my H1.
Mhm.
Same thing with this firm. They would not hire me because of my status. My grades were fine. I was in top 25 or 30% of my class.
Mhm.
So my grades were fine. I wasn't in top 10, but I was fairly fine.
Yeah.
And so this is the biggest deal that now I'm stuck. How can I work? I cannot work without somebody. It's not in my hands. So guess what? I started working for a firm here, 2 lawyer firm. One of the guy used to teach at law school, and he was paying me nothing. Basically, there was no salary, but for 1 year, you can do optional practical training. All foreign students are allowed to work 1 year for anybody. So I chose to work with them. And and so there was this Vietnamese lawyer, Trang Tran, who used to office with them in a small little office. And he became friends with me. And so after almost, I was about to finish 1 year, and I asked these guys if they'll do my H1, and they said no. So I can't stay here. My bar license was conditional. It said that you cannot work as a lawyer unless you are on a proper immigration status. So I'm talking to Trang, and he just out of nowhere offers me, says, look, I do employment law. I know you're pretty smart in business side, and I have a lot of these Asian clients and connections that I can get some Korean and Chinese and Vietnamese business. And why don't you work under my supervision? And we split it 3 ways. I give one referral fee, and I keep 1/3, and I give you 1/3, whatever we make. And I'll do your H1. This was a godsend opportunity for me. And I said, Trang, I love it, love you for it. And so we worked like that for about 2 years. He did my H1. And then he and I were having some issues about, splitting and all that. So 2 years later, another friend of mine who was in law school, this time an Indian guy, Vijay Kale, who had just left his job, and he wanted to come work with me. And he said, hey, can I come work with you? And he did immigration law. I said, yes, Vijay, but you know my status. So Vijay wants to work for me, but he says he'll do my H1 because he's an American citizen.
Yeah.
So I'm technically his senior, but he's my boss.
Yeah.
So then I changed my H1 to him.
Uh-huh.
So this is the problem, that for first 10 years or so in America, I'm always hanging with that little thread. I don't know when that's going to break and when I'm going to fall. And it's basically the immigration status. Nobody mistreated me, but these are the things that, think about from an immigrant, that Canada allows immigrants to come based on their qualifications. But America, it doesn't matter how qualified I am. Somebody has to do my visa, my status. So now Vijay does my status.
Yeah.
And then I asked him, and so about 6 years are about to finish, because you cannot have H1 more than 6 years. So after the 4th year, I say, hey, we need to do my green card. And he says, Dinesh, I can apply for it. It'll give you a few years, but it's probably not going to be accepted, because how do I prove that I'm some unique individual or unique professional, and I do something that an American lawyer cannot do? Legal profession is something that every American, there are so many Americans who do what I do. So
Yeah.
there's nothing unique about my profession from the immigration status. He says, but it'll buy you some time. I said, that's fine. So he does my application for my green card. Now, I don't know if it would have ever been approved. I probably would not have approved, but it would have bought me 5-6 years of that while they're considering it.
Yeah.
And so then luckily I met my wife online.
Yeah.
She's from California, from same place where I was in when I was taking the bar exam, but I didn't meet her that time. And so I met her online. I went to see her. I proposed to her first meeting. We were engaged. And I can tell you that somewhere in my head, I'm sure I had this idea that, oh gosh, I'm glad she's a citizen.
Yeah.
I didn't say that to her. I didn't ask her because I thought if I mention it, she'll probably just dump me. She'll think I'm marrying her because of her status, right? But every immigrant has that in his head somewhere.
Yeah.
And so she didn't know. She didn't ask me my status. She didn't know. And we got married in about 6-8 months after I first met her. And for 2 years, I didn't even apply through her because I was trying to see how my green card application through Vijay would go.
Yeah.
And then at some point of time, he says, it's time for you to take that step because it's probably not going to go anywhere.
Yeah.
So then I asked her, and I finally applied like 2 years after marriage. By this time, she was pregnant. So
Yeah.
I felt that I had at least some claim now that I'm a father of her kid.
Yeah. I see. Did you meet? Oh, sorry. Continue.
Go ahead.
I was just gonna ask. Did you meet?
Asking her that.
She finally said yes.
No, she never said. She said, "Yeah, of course."
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was just gonna ask. Did you meet her while you're still studying for your bar exam? Online?
No. So see, my bar exam was in '95. You're talking about. I met her in 2003.
Okay.
I've already been on my own from 93 to 2003. I survived 10 years before I met her. And I did not apply for my green card through her until 2005. So that's the 12th year. So I struggled through 12 years. So that's the adversity I faced.
Yeah.
And the other adversity obviously is that, look, I still have an accent. My English is very good. Yeah. But I still struggle with the language. I still have an accent. And when you're litigating, when you're in front of a jury, and I have to pronounce words, I have to Google search how the pronunciation works of certain words.
Yeah.
So those are the challenges as a doctor may not face that challenge because the human body is the same. But suddenly in law, where you're impressing the judge or jury, you're making an argument, and then these American lawyers speaking in their tone and their accent, and I'm challenged, culturally challenged. I don't know what people think here, right? So those are the challenges, but the common sense, our values from Asia, I do think that what helped me is that my family background of common sense and the Asian values, because when you talk common sense and they realize you're sincere and you're helping them, so I have been able to overcome those challenges. Yeah. But even now, sometimes the judges treat me as if, you're rambling. You can't even say a sentence. I mean, a judge told me last week that I was rambling. He thought my English but again, I mean, it happens even to American lawyers. I'm sure he says that to anybody, but that's, but those are the challenges.
For sure.
That you face.
Did you face any, I know you talked a little bit about inside the court, but like maybe outside of the courtroom, any like subtle, I know like discrimination is very real. My parents personally face some of
Yeah,
that themselves. So
yeah.
like, did you ever feel like you kind of faced some of that?
I didn't feel bad because despite all my challenges, I'm still physically, I look better
Mhm.
compared to some of our parents. And I can put up this stupid poker face and act, I'm tall, I dress well, I drive a nice car now.
Mhm.
So I was able to not face some of the things that I can understand some of our parents face, where they're not, because I'm polished by now.
Yeah.
uh, that boarding school taught me to become polished, right? I learned, and but our parents still, their personalities are not as dynamic as such.
Mhm.
They look simple. They wear simple clothes. I see some of the Indian parents; they look terrible, and I feel bad for them because I feel that somebody's judging them right now, right?
Mhm.
So I didn't face that because physically I looked good and I acted like I belonged here,
Yeah.
despite my accent. So I didn't face that sort of stuff. I'm sure a few times I've been called a nigger in New York City, Central Park, but that's
Mhm.
just some bunch of, you know, like stupid people saying that. I
Yeah,
don't think they said that because I looked, it is what it is.
for sure. Um, just to kind of switch up gears,
Yeah.
I like your wife, you said you met her online.
Mhm.
Um, what was kind of like the premise for that? Is she in a similar profession to you or similar interests?
No, she's actually a physician. She's a
Oh,
family
okay.
medicine doctor.
Uh-huh.
And so I always wanted a professional, somebody who'll work, have, because again, remember my childhood,
Hmm.
a uncouth business background. So my dream was to have a sophisticated, clean life with a professional wife, professional, so I can, because I remember those kids who came from those kind of families.
Yeah.
Uh, so I wanted somebody my equal, uh, and somebody who, another thing I had in my head, what if I'm struggling?
Mhm.
If she's working professional, she can take care of my kids. I won't have to worry about if I were to die, right?
Yeah.
So there's always, you think about these things. I don't think I planned it that way, but if you asked me that what would you like, I would have said, well, I like a professional, somebody
Hmm.
who worked. I don't want a housewife because I saw my mother being a housewife all her life, didn't get any respect. She worked like a laborer all her life.
Yeah.
And, not that my dad abused her or anything, but I
Mhm.
don't think she got the same respect that a fellow spouse should get,
Mhm.
because,
Definitely.
because she's doing the labor work for you. She's cooking for you. She's cleaning your clothes for you.
Yeah.
Uh,
That makes sense. So you're trying to kind of break out of like that traditional gender role. And,
Yeah. And second income. Look, you always think that how would we be comfortable?
mm,
That what if I'm struggling? Then at
yeah,
least we have our income. So that's another, I think it's another Asian traits. We think through those things. So I
definitely.
wanted somebody, my type, and I did not want to marry a lawyer. Honestly, I just wanted to avoid, because I'm also very I want to have a different perspective in the house.
Hmm.
And since I grew up with that science, my dad's science thing, medicine and engineering is what I was looking for, honestly,
Yeah.
because I wanted, since I was weak in science, I thought maybe my spouse would be good and maybe my kids will be too.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes sense. Speaking of like different perspectives, is she also, were her parents immigrants to
Yes,
America? I see. So
yes,
she's a generation up on you.
yes. So she came, although her life is a little checkered as well.
Hmm.
She came in middle school, and then her parents came, uh, and then they were struggling, so they went back. Her dad is a doctor, but he came here in his
Hmm.
40s, and he didn't want to do residency again.
Oh,
So
yeah.
his brother was here, so he started doing a motorcycle business. He had a
Uh-huh.
shop where he was selling motorcycles,
Hmm.
and a doctor. And that
Yeah.
didn't survive, so he struggled. So they decided to go back.
Hmm.
So they went back when she was just out of high school,
Yeah.
and so she went to medical school in India, and then
Hmm.
2 years later they came back. The parents
Uh-huh.
came back, but she stayed. And can you imagine that she came in middle school, but they didn't have money to pay for medical school. They didn't want
Hmm.
it alone, so they asked her to do medical school from her hometown in India,
Yeah.
even though
That's
she could have. And she was a good kid here. She was always a strong
mhm.
academics kid here.
Yeah.
But I find it amazing that she, being a green card here, she went back to do MD in India, and then she came back and did residency from here.
Yeah.
So that was her unique challenge.
That's crazy. Is she actively practicing right now?
Yes, so she is now a medical director at an urgent care.
Oh,
Yes,
wow. Hmm.
Doctors Express. So she's
Yeah,
worked many years with them.
I see. Can you kind of talk about how you guys ended up in Houston together? I know she's from California, so
So I met her, April 19th of 2003. I proposed to her same day, first meeting.
yeah.
In May, I went and we got engaged.
Hmm.
Uh, in October, we got married. And I, remember I had passed the California bar exam.
Yeah.
So her parents actually asked me if I should consider moving to California. But the problem I had was my status at that time. And also because I was in my own practice, sort of, with Vijay. And I didn't want to take a chance and be dependent on my future in-laws. So, and my wife actually was okay with moving to Houston because she wanted to get out away from her parents because she had lived with them forever.
Yeah.
And so she didn't mind that. So we decided to move, that we'll keep living in Houston because I was already in Houston.
Yeah.
So she came with her car full of, basically she shipped a car of hers and her personal items. That's it. And I left my apartment, and we basically I took my clothes, and we took an apartment by the museum district on
Hmm.
Bin Street,
Yeah.
and we started our life new like that.
Oh, okay. And you guys have been there since?
We've been here
Yeah,
since then.
I
Of course,
see.
we moved out of that apartment within
Yeah.
4 months.
Mhm. Okay. Kind of shifting more into like the Houston career scene.
Yes.
Uh, what makes you so passionate about your career in law?
So my career in law is, remember that the politics part was always there. I
Yeah.
always wanted to represent people.
Hmm.
So law is the micro representation. I'm representing one or two clients at a time,
Yeah.
and and I find law for me as something that fits very naturally to me because I like to resolve problems,
Yeah.
and I see big picture. I'm a common sense guy,
Hmm.
and I don't think I could have done anything other than law and politics. So in a way, I've done both. I haven't really achieved anything in politics yet, but I have been involved with politics. That I have been involved even when I was in law school. I worked with ACLU as a fellow intern for about 6 months. And I met a great lady called Sissy Farenthold, who had run for governor of state of Texas. She was the first woman in Texas legislature. So she liked me. She took me under the wing. She became my mentor. And I remember when the second Iraq war was about to happen, I was protesting with her at the Herman Park saying no to war. And the joke was that Dinesh, with your student status, you can be deported.
Oh.
But I have photos with her protesting. And then 2 years later, she asked me to come and serve on the board of Rothko Chapel.
Hmm.
Now, Rothko Chapel is one of the interfaith uh, institutions, one of the great institutions of Houston. I don't know if you know, if you've been there,
Hmm.
but it's one of the, it's got Mark Rothko's paintings, which are probably worth $1 billion.
Yeah.
They're all black, right? And I was honored to, I was the youngest person to be asked to serve on the board
Hmm.
of Rothko Chapel. So I have practiced law, but also have continued my involvement with. So at the same time, when I was serving with Rothko Chapel, I remember Diana at Rice
Hmm.
asked me to come on the board of Rice's Center for Women and Gender Studies board.
Yeah.
And because she saw that I was involved with these activities,
Hmm.
and so I served on that. I have been active in Democratic politics in Houston.
Yeah.
I was elected as the president of Harris County Democratic Lawyers Association.
Okay.
So my business practice is passionate, but I'm also, it's both goals. So I'm passionate about representing and standing up for somebody who's been wronged. Let's put it
Yeah.
this way. And
Hmm.
and the lucky thing that happened is the bad thing about my visa status was that I couldn't get in a big firm. But the blessing is that by working for small firms, small individuals, I get clients who are normal mom and pop small business clients.
Yeah.
So I love that. So
Hmm.
that's why I feel that this is the profession for me.
Yeah. Just to elaborate a little bit more, one of my other questions is actually going to ask you about the advisory board at Rice. But I think on your website, you say that you kind of refer to yourself as a champion of women's rights.
Yes.
Um, and I just want to ask, why do you feel so strongly for women's rights, and how might your background kind of contribute to that?
So, I remember when I was in boarding school in India,
Mhm.
there was a debate on some issue involving a women's right issue.
Yeah.
And I can't tell you that I knew exactly what feminists mean or
Hmm.
feminism meant. But I remember as almost like spontaneously, somebody attacked my argument.
Uh-huh.
And when I had a rebuttal, I said, you know, I think I'm a feminist.
Uh-huh.
And I didn't know what it meant
Hmm.
100%. Only thing it meant was that I am going to stand up for women equality,
Uh-huh.
because I saw my mother
Yeah.
not being treated equal.
Hmm.
That was my biggest deal, that my mother was, I always had this feeling that she didn't get her due respect.
Yeah.
So maybe it came from there.
Hmm.
And I always get along with women really well. And so when I went to Delhi Law School, the dean of the Delhi Law School was a man called Professor Bakshi.
Uh-huh.
And I remember, I'm very free thinking guy and very progressive in some ways. At home, I'm very conservative. I live very conservative life.
Hmm.
But this guy, what he used to do was he used to use her or she as a neutral gender. So if he'll talk in general terms, he won't say, hey, if this person, if he does this, he'll say if she does this, or if she has to.
Oh.
So
Hmm.
that's the first time and I thought, wow, that was pretty cool.
Yeah.
So I started using that. I started copying him. I stopped using his, him, or him, he. I
Uh-huh.
started using her, she. I thought it made me cool. I don't know if I really believed in it, but I thought it was cool. And then I met Sissy Fernthal that I was talking about. Is probably the most impressive woman I've ever met. Her life is a life of discipline, very, and I felt that we men don't have any superior rights to claims to. Of course, don't say this to my wife, because she'll tell you that I'm a really, when it comes to her and me, I'm pretty difficult, and I
Uh,
am.
yeah.
But I also think we're equal, right? I mean, so I can fight with her equally. So
Hmm.
it's just like my boyfriend.
Hmm.
Why do I have to be nicer? Of course, there are some courtesies which come,
Hmm.
but generally, I feel that we are equal gender. We have to treat each other equal.
Yeah.
So that's why I've always been involved with that.
Hmm.
And when Diana asked me for this, I thought, wow, that's great. I
Hmm.
love to,
Yeah.
you know. And I'll tell you one thing that uh, I've always thought in American politics, religion plays a big role, and every discrimination, especially against women or even LGBT community, or for that matter, African Americans, or I see a some kind of connection to religious bigotry
Yeah.
somewhere. Some authority in some religious book that they cite allows them to do discrimination.
Yeah.
So and I'm not very religious. I'm a Hindu. I like the Hindu philosophy and I love
Hmm.
some of the stuff, but I'm not super religious. If somebody says, "Hey, that's the only path," no, that's not the only path because
Yeah.
Uh, so that's where I am. Where at Rice, when I got this opportunity for women thing, I also started a prize in my grandfather's name to have a paper critiquing religious impact on these women and gender issues.
Yeah.
So I feel that we need to be equal. So we can, whether you treat each other equally, that means that it gives me a right to be equal. I can
Hmm.
talk to them on an equal footing.
Yeah. That's very admirable. Um, I know apart from like women's rights, are there any other specific movements that you're personally like very involved in or believe in?
Yes, so I have been involved with Americans United for Separation of Church and State
Hmm.
for exact same reason that I was just telling you,
Yeah,
that
for
I
sure.
feel that combining religion with politics
Hmm.
is like it's like driving drunk and plus having drugs together.
Yeah.
So if we keep religion out of politics, to me, most of the discrimination and most of the bad politics in this country and discrimination
Yeah.
against everybody is somehow connected to some religious doctrine somewhere.
Hmm.
Slavery was justified because of religion. The discrimination against women and LGBTQ, they'll tell you it's all sinful. That Lord said it's sinful.
Yeah.
So I am very passionate about keeping religion out of politics. That's
Hmm.
my biggest deal.
Yeah. That makes sense. How do you feel about like the political scene in Houston in general? And I know Houston is a big city, so there's always something going on, and I just want to know how you feel about that.
But you mean the political scene, you said?
Just in general, like the
Yeah.
climate.
So the political climate, right?
Yeah.
So generally, I think Houston is a pretty friendly city. Most of the people I would think in the urban areas are fairly uh, common sense folks. But we do have issues in politics that both sides. One side is obviously a lot of religious issues, and the other side problem is the lot of uh, this identity based politics. So as a Democrat, I feel that in the Democratic Party sometimes the identity takes is more superior to merit or to substance. And as a proud, somebody who's worked hard, I don't think that we should divide each other. The melting pot, what the term that I used to hear when I first came to America, I think I don't hear that anymore.
Yeah.
That melting pot concept is going down.
Hmm.
So I feel that, we are becoming so diverse that it's critical now to us to always also strive towards that melting pot,
Yeah.
because otherwise we'll have our divisions. And that's the problem I see in Houston and our country's politics as well, besides religious impact on it.
For sure. As a lawyer in this kind of climate, how do you personally see yourself? Like, what role do you hold, and what identity have you come to identify yourself with?
To stand for what's right, and that's
Mhm.
what I'm still striving. I have not given up on my political ambitions either, and
Yeah.
I feel that so for example, I want to stand for everybody who's being discriminated, like
Hmm.
whether it's Muslims sometimes, whether it's recent Asian attacks, where it's African
Yeah.
Americans, Black lives, whatever. I just think that without insulting the majority or the other side, we need
Hmm.
to, I want to continue working towards common sense with saying, look, we're all in this together. Four
Yeah.
generations later, our kids are going to look similar. They're not going to look like what we look.
Yeah,
6 generations later. So we better make our country a true melting pot of some time.
definitely. Do you have any advice for people who are interested in bridging cultures and like nations?
So, in good faith, keep acting in good faith, be human to each
Mhm.
other. And, that's what I say. I said, don't judge each other based on our, color or looks or whatever. I
Yeah.
mean, we are individuals first, right? We
Mhm.
treat each other as a human being and see what fits us and
Yeah.
stop making general assumptions and general things.
Mhm. Kind of going along this advice line, do you have any advice for any students struggling to decide on what they want in the future, and particularly those that might be interested in heading down this path of law?
So the law is a great path. It's also very stressful, but if you want to make changes, that I still think that law gives you that opportunity. It opens up a lot of doors because our society is based on rules and procedure. So
Yeah.
if you know that, you certainly in a good this thing. What
Mhm.
I say to, especially to students, not somebody like you because you already know what I'm going to say,
Yeah.
but I see these Hispanic kids or Black kids or people in lower middle class families. And I keep telling them that, look, if you want to get out of this rut of labor, middle class struggles,
Yeah.
do I can only tell you what my father said. The only way
Mhm.
to get out of it is by education. If
Yeah.
you have to take student loans, take it. Get yourself a professional degree. That's the only way, because if you work as a laborer, as a technician, you're always dependent on somebody else.
Mhm.
You're always going to struggle. You're not going to make a very good living. Uh, if you're ambitious, the only way to get out of it is education. That's what I say.
Yeah. Um, this is a little off to the side, but do you feel like there's like a glass ceiling now that you're very polished and accomplished in Houston and in America in general? Do you feel like there is a glass ceiling for Asian American lawyers?
So I still think that we still have tougher odds.
Mhm.
So when I'm standing in a court, let's say with a American lawyer who's from here, I still think I have higher tougher odds, and
Mhm.
I think every Asian lawyer would feel that way
Yeah.
uh, because we are still very few in numbers, and we still don't do a lot of us don't do litigation. We are, compared to medicine, for example,
Yeah.
Asian Americans are doing very well in medicine and engineering and IT, but
Yeah.
in law, we are still a very small minority, and I think we still have very tough odds. And some of we need to keep working. We need to keep getting new generation of our kids come in and say that we can do it and we can do pretty well, because we also have common sense. We have our values which really fit the legal profession, because
Mhm.
our values, I think our values really help this
Yeah,
profession.
definitely. I did a little background research before this, but I
Yeah.
noticed that you campaigned for justice, First Court of
Yes.
Appeals, in
Yes.
2020. Would you be willing to speak about your experience and any lessons you may have learned?
Yeah. So it was a great experience.
Mhm.
The problem with my campaign was that I ran a very mom and pop show because I didn't raise much money. I didn't ask anybody directly for money. I got some money raised by my friends without my asking. Most of the friends were the families from my kids' school and things like that.
Yeah.
Uh, but I don't think it would have mattered even if I raised more money, and I realized that pretty early on.
Uh,
The thing with Democrat, I ran as a Democrat,
yeah.
and so in the primary, I had an opponent, a Hispanic female,
Hmm.
uh, and there were 36 judicial races in Harris County
Yeah.
for all the judges and for all the even the statewide races.
Hmm.
And if I tell you that in 36 primaries, not a single man won. Every primary was won by a woman.
Uh,
Some of the sitting judges, male sitting judges, lost in the primary
yeah.
to new women candidates.
Hmm.
So the problem with our election system that I realize is that people don't know who they're voting for.
Yeah.
They cannot research so many races.
Hmm.
They worry about senators and congress people and president, but
Hmm.
nobody cares about judicial races, even
Yeah.
though as a judge, I impact your life more directly than Mr. President does,
Yeah.
right? Mr. Senator does.
Mhm.
But people do not know. So what they do is they go and just pick. And if you have my name and a female name, guess whom you're gonna pick?
Yeah.
I would pick a female's name
Yeah.
myself.
Hmm.
So I still got received 100,888 votes in 10 counties.
Yeah.
And I did better than a lot of other men.
Uh-huh.
And I'm thinking, sometimes I wonder, why did I get better than some of these other men? And I'm
Hmm.
thinking, maybe because some people thought my name, Dinesh, may have sounded to them Dinesh like a woman's name.
Oh.
And maybe I got some extra votes because of that.
Yeah.
So the problem, the experience is that in Democratic primary and the election in Harris County,
Hmm.
it's very difficult to really have a uniformed vote because people
Yeah.
don't know whom they're voting for.
Hmm.
So it was a great experience though, because I met a lot of people. I went and I was invited to a lot of groups to talk,
Yeah.
and they heard me, and it was great. It was a great experience.
I see. Is there any way you would want to change the system if you could?
Yes, I would. I've been advocating changing at least the judicial system of electing judges, because we elect judges with no, with basically a lot of our judges don't have much experience of trial. Some of them didn't even practice as a lawyer much
Hmm.
when they became judges. And so I like to change the qualifications if I can, and maybe even not have election. But because I don't know how you can have a million people elect judges when they have no clue who these judges are.
Yeah, that makes sense. Um, Kind of segueing into this, just do you have any other stories, experiences, or memories about, yourself that you would want to share? Maybe they can show how you embraced diversity or reconciled, sorry, with your identity. Yeah.
Yes. So my identity is, if you ask me who I am, of course I'll say I'm from India and Asian and all that.
Yeah.
But deep down in my heart, I feel I'm nothing but an individual. I'm just a human being in
Hmm.
one body, and I look at everybody else. When I look at you, I don't look at you anything other than just a fellow human being.
Yeah.
And that's what I teach my kids, to have an open mind, a free thinking mind, and don't judge people based on any looks or anything.
Hmm.
And so my identity is, I'm very individual. So that's something, I guess that's what in India we used to say, that America is a very individualistic society.
Hmm.
And I feel that I am the epitome or the true example of that individual.
Yeah.
That I feel I'm nothing but one human being. That's
Hmm.
it, out of 6 billion people. And I don't feel that I'm from India or here, because it's the same Mother Earth, is one Earth. It doesn't matter if I'm standing on this corner or that corner of Asia or America, right?
Yeah.
So we have created these divisions, And I feel that there should not, that we should treat each other just as fellow human beings who are here on at least for few years. It's
Hmm.
all gonna end. This body's not gonna stay with me. So I'm
Yeah.
basically that little speck of soul, whatever that is,
Mhm.
and I don't know where I'll be after that, right?
Yeah.
So that's my biggest identity,
Hmm.
that I don't want to put myself in a box. I don't see myself, so I don't hang out only with Indians or anything. I mean, I do not.
Hmm.
When I was in law school, I hardly attended any, say, Indian bars or Asian bar. Of course, I go sometimes, but
Yeah.
I'm not as passionate about marginalizing myself in a box.
Hmm.
I'm more of a, you know, everybody together kind of a guy.
Yeah, I can definitely agree with that perspective. Uh, and then just sort of talking more about recent events, like COVID has really impacted a lot of industries and professions. How has it impacted you specifically?
So COVID has not impacted me much or my family because
Hmm.
I actually worked every day. I went to office every day throughout COVID
Hmm.
because my office building in downtown was closed for about 6 months
Hmm.
and there was nobody there.
Yeah.
So I was there sitting alone and I worked every day. I went every day. Of course, I took precautions.
Yeah.
My business has not suffered luckily last year. I had work that was continuing and that kept me busy last year. So
Hmm.
my year has been fairly normal.
Hmm.
That was so I have, and my same way with my wife. She worked from home, but she works as a director, so she doesn't do much clinical hours.
Oh, I see.
Uh,
Yeah.
so she does more supervision. So
Hmm.
our family, of course, the biggest impact was the kids. Their
Yeah.
school was shut down, and
Hmm.
it was very difficult to have them home uh, and avoid having so much screen time.
Hmm. Yeah.
But other than that, I don't think the COVID impacted me. But I've lost some friends.
Hmm.
I had several friends and clients who had COVID.
Yeah.
In fact, I lost two, three friends who actually died because of COVID,
Hmm.
but not in my immediate family.
Yeah. I'm still sorry to hear that.
Yeah.
Kind of more on a happier note, you mentioned your kids, so I just thought of it. But what are your hopes and expectations for your children, especially after all the experiences that you've gone through in your younger days?
Yeah. You know, both my kids are so bright that I
Mhm.
keep thinking they both are St. John's. They're both high honor kids so far, touch wood. And my son sings, which was one of my biggest regrets in life that I didn't have that skill or talent.
Mhm.
So my son sings, and uh, my only hope. Sometimes I worry about them is that I hope so far they've done very well,
Yeah.
and as a parent, the only fear is that I hope they don't lose track at some later stage.
Yeah.
That they, of course, I want them to be in the best college, just like every other Asian parent.
For sure.
I tried to get him to the boarding school at Andover and Exeter this year. He got on
Mhm.
wait list. He didn't get in.
Yeah.
So that was a little disappointment. But, as an Asian parent, I want him to be in the best college, the
Mhm.
best school possible, and do the best he can.
Mhm.
That's all,
Yeah.
but so far they've made me, I can't even, when I see them getting scores in 90s where I
Mhm.
was barely passing,
Yeah.
that itself is a big deal, right?
Mhm. Yeah. Going back to like your values, right? Working hard, getting an education. Um, I just want to ask one last question, like just about Houston and its community. How do you kind of view the community here at Houston, and do you see yourself living in Houston for a very long time?
Yes, yes. I think I found home. I felt home the moment I, got down of that plane in 95 when I came to law school. This city is, to me, is perfect for me because it's a big city, but it feels like it has that small city element to it.
Yeah.
where unlike New York, I don't see a lot of kitch, 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 kitch.
Mhm.
And I love the hot weather, believe it or not, because I came from India. From my hometown was almost similar weather. And
Mhm.
if actually, if you look on the map, the globe, Delhi and my hometown and Houston happen to be in the same lines.
Oh, okay.
So 7 oceans apart,
Uh-huh.
I'm basically in the same humid condition. Of course,
Mhm.
Delhi didn't have a sea, so there was no humidity, but it's basically 8 months of summer,
Mhm. Yeah.
right? So I love the weather. I love the people. The thing about Houston is the diversity. I love it that we can have whatever we want. There's so much Indian population. There's so much, I don't miss anything. In fact, there's nothing here that we deprived, and it's very friendly. Despite, I mean, I'm sure there are issues here and there, and I see myself living here. Unless my kids were in a different town, then I may have to move to be close to them. That's different.
Yeah.
This thing, but if all stays normal, then I see myself dying in this town.
Mhm. That's great. Um, yeah, do you have anything else you want to add? Anything you might want to slip in before we conclude the interview?
Um, I'm very honored
Mhm.
when Anne asked me to be part of this.
Yeah.
Uh, and and I want to say this, that I'm glad that she, at least among the Asian community, this is a melting pot for all of us.
Yeah.
Although think about it, we are very different. Asia is
Mhm.
very different.
Yeah.
Uh, so what I like to say is that our community can really make a difference in this country and in this city
Mhm.
by imbibing our values of education, of
Yeah.
higher education and family values.
Mhm.
I think if America can adopt, the mainstream of America can adopt some of our values of family uh, being together and education, and then we obviously accept their dynamism and their hard work, and this country, it still has potential of being great, and we really have a role in this. They need to realize this, that we're a very smart community. We really have a role in making this country and this place great again.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you so much for that. And thank you so much for sharing with me today. I really appreciated that. I'll stop the recording here because I
Yeah.
think that concludes our interview. So um, let me